One of the questions I get quite oftenly is, if there's one Jesus and there's one message, then why do we have it in four different gospels? It's a real question. In fact, the early church tried to harmonize everything, to put it all into one story. That's why we kind of get the story of Jesus' birth, where the wise men show up and the shepherds and everybody at the same night. But if you've looked at the early chapters of both Matthew and Luke, you'll discover that Luke doesn't have anything about the wise men, and Matthew doesn't have anything about the shepherds. And Jesus is a child by the time the wise men show up in Matthew. So, why is there four different versions of the gospel? To be honest, there's actually more books written about Jesus' early life. The earliest church picked these four as being the best examples of what Jesus tried to teach. But there are others. You can find the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Peter, and all sorts of different Gospels out there. They're under the title of Gnostic books, Gnostic, if you're curious. The early church looked at them and said, you know what, this just doesn't share enough of the Jesus message as we understand it. So we're not going to include them in the books of the Bible. So why is there four? Well, first of all, there were four written at different times. So Mark comes first, and he was written around the year 60. Now, Paul, all of his letters were written in the year 50 or before. So the Gospels are actually written after the letters of Paul, even though they're at the beginning of the Christian scriptures in the New Testament. And the reason they're there is because they tell the story of Jesus, not because they were chronologically written first. In fact, the first gospel was Matthew, and that was actually the second gospel written around the year 80. Then Luke is believed to be around the year 90, and John around the year 100. And on top of that, they were writing to different communities. So Luke was writing to a community that was very active with social justice, and Matthew was writing to a community that was very active in preparing themselves to be the best representatives of the church that they could be. And John was interested in helping a community that had been formed by Paul teach them more about the theology. In fact, most of Christian theology comes from the Gospel of John and the letter to the Romans. And Mark, he was first out of the gate with all of them. He was writing before the temple even collapsed. So he's writing to a world where no one knows what's going to happen. And the people in the gospel don't even know that Jesus is the Messiah until the very, very end. And each of these, written in different places to different people at different times in history, all shared the story, the primary message of Jesus about love and about how we're all accepted and God is here for all of us. So even though they were in different places and they maybe had different stories, different versions of what happened, they all talk about Jesus as the Savior to the world, Jesus as coming as God incarnate, Jesus as showing what love looked like. Jesus is being really angry at injustice, especially economic injustice. So that's why they're four different gospels and they all tell the same thing. Think about it. If you're with your group of friends and someone asks what happened, chances are you're going to have four different perspectives because you're looking at whatever happened in four different ways. How it relates to you, where you were standing when it happened, when you heard about it. It's all different, but it doesn't make the story of what actually happened any less important. So that's why we have four Gospels. And the other part of that is we don't even know who wrote them. They were all written anonymous. But the early church decided to assign the names of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So we don't know. In fact, there's some people who think that John's Gospel was written by a committee that involved a lot of women on it as well. And the beloved disciple might actually have been a woman before someone decided that they were going to make it a man. So much is unknown about the Gospels, except that they all told the story of Jesus for the community where they were writing. So that's why we have four.